They called him the Winter Duke. Alistair Vance, Duke of Ashworth, possessed an estate ravaged by debt and a heart frozen by grief. To save his legacy, he endured the ultimate transaction: marriage to Lady Alara Harrington, a merchant's daughter, whose dowry was the only warmth his house had seen in years. On their wedding night, with the ink barely dry, he sealed her fate with a vow spoken like ice. "I will never love you." He watched her, expecting hysterics, pleading. He saw nothing. But he was not prepared for the woman behind the dowry, nor for the moment a single, silent tear on her cheek would shatter his defenses and expose the ruinous lies they both were living. The bells of St. George's, Hanover Square, rang with a hollow, metallic sound, each peal a hammer blow against Alistair Vance's skull. As the new Duke of Ashworth, he stood at the altar, rigid as the marble effigies of his ancestors. The air was thick with the scent of hothouse lilies, overpowering and funereal. Beside him, his bride, Lady Alara Harrington, was a vision in ivory satin and antique lace, her face obscured by a veil that seemed less a bridal tradition and more a shroud. He had seen her only 3 times before this day. Once at a rout, where she was a wallflower, notable only for the obscene wealth her father, the industrialist Viscount Harrington, possessed. Once at a tense dinner, where the terms of this merger were finalized. And once in his solicitor's office, where she had signed the marriage contracts with a steady, gloved hand. She was the price of his survival. The late Duke, Alistair's father, had been a man of voracious appetites and catastrophic luck. He had gambled away fortunes, mortgaged lands that had been in the Vance name since the Norman conquest. Ashworth, the sprawling ancestral seat, was crumbling. The London house was a shell, its furnishings ticketed for auction. Alistair, inheriting the title 6 months prior, had inherited only ruin. Until Harrington, the new money Viscount, desperate for the validation only an ancient title could provide, offered a solution: his daughter for the ducal coronet. Alara's dowry was staggering, enough to clear every debt, restore every stone, and secure the Vance legacy for a generation. Alistair despised it. He despised Harrington's grasping ambition. He despised the ton who whispered behind their fans, calling him the sold Duke. And though he knew it was unjust, he despised the woman who was the symbol of his humiliation. "I will," he ground out, his voice loud in the quiet church. When the vicar turned to her, Alara's voice was soft, but clear. "I will." There was no warmth, no joy. It was the ratification of a treaty. As he lifted the veil, he forced himself to look at her. She was not a classic beauty. Her features were too intelligent, her mouth too firm, her eyes a deep, unsettling shade of violet. They met his, not with fear or adoration, but with a disturbing, quiet appraisal. He snapped the veil back down. The carriage ride to Ashworth House was suffocating. They sat opposite each other, the silence broken only by the rattle of the cobbles. Alara did not fidget. She did not weep. She simply watched the city pass, her hands folded in her lap. Alistair felt a sudden, sharp spike of irritation. Why was she so calm? Did this mean nothing to her but a step up the social ladder? Was she so cold, so transactional, that marrying a man who clearly loathed her was just the cost of business? He had prepared for tears, for trembling, for maidenly vapors. This composure was an affront. The wedding breakfast was a strained, miserable affair. Alistair's only living relative, his sister Lady Honoria Vance, tried to maintain a semblance of cheer, but her bright chatter faltered against the wall of Alistair's icy silence and Alara's polite monosyllables. The guests, sensing the frost, ate quickly and left, whispering of the winter wedding. By nightfall the house was quiet. Elara had been shown to the Duchess's apartments, a sprawling suite of rooms that had not been occupied since Alistair's mother died a decade ago. He knew his duty. He knew what was expected of him tonight to secure the heir this contract demanded. The thought made his stomach clench. He found her in the sitting room, standing before a cold fireplace. She had dismissed her maid and changed from her wedding gown into a simple dressing robe of deep blue velvet. Her dark hair was unpinned, falling over her shoulders. She looked smaller without the bridal trappings, yet no less composed. He didn't bother with pleasantries. He walked directly to the fireplace, leaning an arm on the marble mantel, effectively trapping her. He loomed over her, using his height, his title, his fury as weapons. "You have what you wanted," he began, his voice a low growl. "You are the Duchess of Ashworth. Your father has his connection to a name older than his factory mills." Elara looked up at him, her violet eyes dark in the candlelight. She said nothing. "Your dowry has been transferred," he continued, biting off each word. "The vultures are satisfied. Ashworth is safe. The contract is fulfilled." He leaned closer, the scent of lavender and starch rising from her. He wanted to see her flinch. He wanted a reaction. "But know this, madam." He used the formal address like a slap. "You have purchased my name. You have my title. You have secured my estate for your father's coffers. But you will never have me. My heart, what is left of it, is my own. I will never love you, Lady Ashworth. Do we understand each other?" This was it. The moment she would dissolve. The moment the merchant's daughter would reveal the weakness beneath the poise. Lady Elara Harrington Vance, the new Duchess of Ashworth, held his gaze for a long, silent moment. The only sound was the ticking of the ormolu clock. Then she gave a single, devastatingly small nod. "You have made yourself perfectly clear, Your Grace." She did not cry. She did not tremble. She simply dipped her head in acknowledgement, a queen accepting a report, and moved to walk past him. Alistair was so stunned by the lack of drama that he didn't move. She had to brush against his arm to get by. The slight contact felt like a burn. He turned, watching her walk to the bedroom door. "Will that be all?" she asked, her hand on the knob. He felt a sudden, unfamiliar surge of something. It was not just anger, it was confusion. It was terrifyingly a sliver of respect. He had delivered his cruelest blow, and she had not even stumbled. "Yes," he snapped. "That will be all." She inclined her head again. "Then I bid you good night, Your Grace." The door closed with a soft, definitive click. Alistair stood alone in the sitting room, the echo of his brutal vow hanging in the air. He had declared war, and his enemy had simply refused to fight. He felt the victory he had sought turn to ash in his mouth, leaving him feeling bizarrely, infuriatingly, like the one who had just lost. A fortnight passed, settling into a pattern of frigid civility. Alistair buried himself in the mountains of paperwork his father had left, working with his solicitors to apply Elara's dowry to the most pressing debts. He saw his wife only at dinner. Their meals were agonizing. Honoria, a kind but nervous young woman of 19, tried to fill the oppressive silence. "The new curtains have arrived for the drawing room, Elara," Honoria would say, her voice overly bright. "The shade of blue is simply divine." "Is it not, Alistair?" "I hadn't noticed," Alistair would murmur, not looking up from his plate. "It is a lovely silk, Honoria," Elara would reply, her voice even. "Perhaps we might look at the new patterns for the chairs tomorrow." Alistair had expected his new Duchess to immediately begin a campaign of lavish redecoration, to fill the house with gaudy, expensive trinkets reflective of her new money origins. He expected her to demand a dizzying schedule of balls and routs, eager to flaunt her new title. She did none of these things. She rose early. She met with the housekeeper, Mrs. Croft, a formidable woman who had intimidated Alistair his entire life. He overheard their conversation one morning, pausing outside the morning room. "And the expenditure on wax candles is simply unsustainable, Your Grace," Mrs. Croft was saying, her tone respectful but firm. "The late Duke was particular." "I see," Alistair heard Elara reply. He preferred to light the entire ballroom, even when not in use. "From now on, Mrs. Croft, we will light only the rooms we occupy. Tallow will suffice for the servants' hall, and I've reviewed the household books. The contract with the butcher in Cheapside is extortionate. Please send for Mr. Davies." Alistair frowned. Mr. Davies was his steward, the man who managed the estate ledgers. He had been with his father for 20 years. He found himself watching her. He had intended to ignore her, to relegate her to the status of a well-dressed piece of furniture. But she was present. She did not hide in her rooms. She moved through Ashworth House with a quiet authority that baffled him. The staff, who had been bracing for a demanding new mistress, seemed to visibly relax in her presence. She learned their names. She noticed the pantry boy's cough and had the physician sent for. She discovered the conservatory, a beautiful glass structure that had fallen into neglect, the glass panes cracked and the exotic plants within brown and dying. Alistair hadn't set foot in it for years. It was his mother's sanctuary. He found Elara there one afternoon, her sleeves rolled up, her hands covered in dirt, instructing a gardener on how to prune a withered jasmine. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice echoing harshly in the glass room. Elara didn't startle. She finished her instruction before turning to him, wiping a smudge of soil from her cheek. "I am attempting to save your mother's plants, Your Grace. This phalaenopsis is remarkably resilient. It simply needed repotting." "Leave it," he said. "It is a ruin. I want this place closed." "No," she said, not unkindly. "It is beautiful, or it will be. It just needs care." She turned back to the plant, dismissing him. He stood there for a full minute, feeling like an intruder in his own home, before retreating, his boots crunching angrily on the gravel path. His sister, Honoria, was charmed by Elara. "She is not at all what I expected, Alistair," Honoria confessed to him one evening in the library. She's dreadfully clever. She's helping me with my French, and she doesn't laugh at my sketches." "She is polite, Honoria. It is the one virtue of the merchant class," Alistair replied, his tone dismissive. Honoria frowned, a rare act of defiance against her brother. "That's unfair. You are cruel to her. It is not her fault father ruined us." She looked at the miniature painting on his desk, the one he always kept near. "You are cruel to everyone, ever since Margot. Ever since that winter." Alistair's face shuttered. "Do not speak her name." "You must move on, Alistair. Margot Beaufort is gone." "Leave me," he commanded, his voice deadly quiet. Honoria flinched and fled the room. He picked up the miniature. Lady Margot Beaufort, his childhood friend, the woman he had intended to marry. Her face, all light and laughter, mocked him. He had failed her. He had failed his father. And now he was tied to a woman of iron composure who looked at him with the cool assessment of a banker. The first true test of their arrangement came a week later at the Duchess of Devonshire's annual ball. It was their first major appearance as a married couple. The whispers were audible as they entered. Elara, in a gown of violet silk that matched her eyes, looked regal. She did not cling to his arm. "The Winter Duke and his golden Duchess," A voice purred beside them. Alistair tensed. Lord Peregrine Shaw, a man Alistair had always distrusted, bowed low over Ilara's hand. Shaw was handsome, wealthy, and possessed a reptilian charm. He had been a close confidant of Alistair's father, a relationship Alistair never understood. Your Grace, Shaw said to Ilara, his eyes lingering on her. You are the miracle of the season. You have not only saved Ashworth, you have managed to tame the Duke himself. I assure you, Lord Shaw, the Duke is no one's tame creature, Ilara replied, her voice smooth as cream. And I am no one's miracle. I am merely the Duchess. She retrieved her hand. Shaw laughed, a sound that grated on Alistair's nerves. A sharp wit. Excellent. Ashworth, you must bring your lovely wife to my card party on Friday. Your father never missed one. We will be otherwise engaged, Alistair said, his voice a flat rejection. Oh? Shaw raised an eyebrow. Too busy counting the new ducats? A pity. Your father always found my tables accommodating. The veiled threat was unmistakable. Alistair felt a cold dread. Shaw was one of his father's principal creditors, or had been, until the dowry. My wife is tired, Alistair said, taking Ilara's arm. You will excuse us. He steered her toward the terrace. Once outside in the cool night air, he released her. Stay away from that man, he ordered. Lord Shaw. Ilara looked intrigued, not frightened. Why? He seems a great admirer of yours, or perhaps of your father's. He is a viper. He preys on weakness. And my father, Alistair said, his voice raw, was the weakest man I ever knew. Ilara watched him, her head tilted. He mentioned your father's card games. Was Lord Shaw? He was my father's ruin, Alistair spat, or a significant part of it. He holds markers, debts, or he did. Your money paid him, I'm sure. I see. Ilara looked back into the ballroom, her gaze sharp as she tracked Lord Shaw, who was now charming some other debutante. He did not look like a man who has been paid in full, Your Grace. He looked like a man who has just had his appetizer snatched away. Alistair stared at her. Her assessment was astute, chillingly so. He had expected her to be frightened by Shaw's intensity or flattered by his attention. Instead, she had analyzed the threat. Just stay away from him, he repeated, feeling oddly protective. It was not for her sake, he told himself. It was to protect the integrity of his name. As you wish, Your Grace, she murmured, and for the first time, he thought he detected a note of irony in her voice. As she turned to go back inside, a breeze caught her wrap, and she shivered. Before he could think, Alistair stepped forward and adjusted the cashmere shawl around her shoulders. His fingers brushed the bare skin of her neck. She froze. He froze. The contact was electric, a shocking jolt of warmth in the cold night. He saw the pulse beat in her throat. He could smell the lavender in her hair. He felt a sudden, dizzying urge to lean closer. He snatched his hand back as if burned. Ilara's eyes, wide and dark, locked with his. The composure was gone, replaced by a flicker of something. Vulnerability? No, it was shock, the same shock he felt. Your Grace, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The air is cold, he said stiffly, retreating to the wall. We should return. He let her walk ahead of him. He clenched his fists, his nails biting into his palms. He had touched her, and the world had not ended. Instead, for a fraction of a second, the icy fog in his mind had cleared. It was the most terrifying sensation he had ever had. The cold truce held for another month. Ilara's days were spent managing the house, restoring the conservatory, and accompanying Honoria on tedious social calls. Alistair's days were spent in the estate office, wrestling with the true scale of his father's neglect. The ledgers Mr. Davies provided were a mess. Even with the dowry, the numbers didn't add up. The tenants on the northern farms at Ashworth were struggling after 2 bad harvests, and the income from their rents was non-existent. "We must simply press them harder, Your Grace," Davies advised, his face impassive. "They are notoriously lazy, these farmers." "They are starving," Ilara said, appearing in the doorway. Alistair looked up, annoyed. She had taken to spending time in the office, ostensibly to learn the management of her new home. He had allowed it, assuming she would be bored within a day. Instead, she sat for hours, poring over the books, her brow furrowed, making small notes in a private ledger. "Madam, this is estate business," Alistair said sharply. "They are my tenants now, are they not?" Ilara countered, walking into the room. She held a letter. "This is from Mr. Thorne, the vicar at Ashworth Village. He writes that the Gable family has been stricken. The fever. Their youngest child died last week. They have sold their livestock to pay the surgeon and now have no food." "A tragic but common story," Davies said with a sniff. "You have allocated funds for the repairs to the South Wing hunting lodge," Ilara said, pointing to an entry in the main ledger. "A lodge that has not been used in 5 years. You have budgeted for 3 new hunters for the stables, yet you have allocated nothing for tenant relief." "The Duke's pleasures," Davies began. "I have no pleasures," Alistair cut in, his voice flat. He felt a familiar headache building. "The lodge is necessary for the autumn shooting season. We must entertain." "Entertain whom? Ghosts?" Ilara's voice was low, but it cut through the room. "We have no money for society, Your Grace. We have money to stop the roof from caving in. And we have money," she looked pointedly at Davies, "or we should have, to keep our people from dying." "Ilara, that is enough," Alistair commanded. Ilara looked at him, her eyes flashing with a fire he had never seen. "No, Your Grace, it is not." She turned to the steward. "Mr. Davies, you will cancel the order for the horses. You will suspend the repairs on the lodge. You will take those funds and dispatch a wagon of grain, salted meat, and blankets to the Ashworth tenants. Immediately." Davies looked, panicked, to Alistair. "Your Grace!" Alistair was trapped, his pride warred with something else. This new, unwelcome logic. He hated her interference. He hated that she was right. And he hated, more than anything, that she was doing the one thing he should have been doing himself. "Do as the Duchess says," he bit out. Davies bowed, his face pale, and scurried from the room. The silence that remained was heavy. Alistair stood, walking to the window, his back to her. "You overstepped. You were frozen," she replied, "lost in your ledgers while people suffer. Is this the Vance legacy? Numbers on a page?" "You know nothing of my legacy," he wheeled on her, his control snapping. "You came here with your father's gold and expect to understand generations of duty. You think you can waltz in here and what? Show basic human decency?" she interrupted, her own voice rising to meet his. "Your pride is magnificent, Your Grace. It is a fortress, but it is starving your people and suffocating this house. My pride is all I have left. My name was dragged through the mud, sold to the highest bidder. Sold to you. Do you think I enjoy this? Do you think I enjoy using your money to fix my ancestral home?" "I do not care what you enjoy," she cried, taking a step toward him. "I do not care about your pride. I care about the old woman in the village who has no firewood. I care about the child who died of a fever that a simple blanket might have prevented. This is not my money, Alice image of X's desk. It is our estate. And it is failing." She was magnificent in her fury. Her cheeks were flushed, her hands clenched. All the blood, all the passion he had thought her incapable of, was blazing in her face, and it was all directed at him. He was stunned into silence. He had wanted a reaction for weeks. Now he had one, and it was devastating. She saw him not as a tyrant, but as a failure. The fight seemed to drain from her as quickly as it had come. She visibly deflated, her shoulders slumping. The fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a profound, shimmering sadness. She turned away from him, her hand going to her throat. I apologize, Your Grace," she whispered, her voice thick. "I forgot my place." She moved toward the door. He saw her shoulders trembling. "Ilara," he said, his voice rough. He didn't know why he said her name. She stopped, her back still to him. He saw her lift a hand to her face, a quick, furtive movement. "Ilara, turn around." She shook her head. He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbing her arm. He spun her to face him, his grip hard. He was prepared for anger. He was not prepared for the tear. It was just one, a single, perfect drop of water, tracing a silent path from the corner of her eye, down the pale plane of her cheek. It clung to her jawline for a half-second before falling, dark, onto the blue silk of her morning dress. She was not sobbing. She was not making a sound. Her face was a mask of utter, heartbreaking despair, as if this one tear was the only evidence of a soul that was cracking apart inside. Alistair's heart stopped. The sound of his own declaration echoed in his mind. "I will never love you." He had said it to wound her. He had said it to protect himself. He had said it because he was a bitter, broken man, haunted by the ghost of Margot Beaufort, a ghost he had used to justify his coldness. In that moment, seeing that solitary tear, his entire fortress of self-pity and pride dissolved. It didn't just crack. It vanished. He saw her. Not the dowry, not the merchant's daughter, not the Duchess. He saw Ilara, a woman of fierce intelligence and deep compassion, chained to a man who had offered her nothing but contempt. His hand, which had been gripping her arm in anger, gentled. His thumb moved, an instinctive, unconscious gesture to brush away the track the tear had left. The moment his skin touched her cheek, she flinched, her eyes widening in terror, as if expecting a blow. And that broke him. His heart, the one he had declared frozen and dead, gave a sharp, agonizing lurch, as if a spike had been driven through it. The pain was physical. He couldn't breathe. "What have I done?" He snatched his hand back. The silence in the room was absolute. He could see the pulse in her throat, the way she was biting her lip to hold back the sob that threatened. He said nothing. He could say nothing. The magnitude of his own cruelty, his own blindness, rendered him mute. With a gasp, Ilara broke free from his loosened grip. She didn't run. She gathered the shredded remnants of her dignity, turned, and walked swiftly from the room. Alistair Vance, the Winter Duke, stood alone in the study. He lifted his hand, the one that had touched her face. His thumb was damp. He stared at it, the single shining drop of his wife's tear. And in the suffocating silence of his frozen life, Alistair's heart broke. The tear changed everything. It was not a grand reconciliation. There were no apologies. Instead, a new, fragile tension settled over Ashworth House. Alistair was no longer cold. He was hesitant. He was watchful. He had declared he would never love her, but that single tear had breached his defenses. It had proven she was not the unfeeling opportunist he had painted her to be. She was a woman trapped, just as he was. But while he had wallowed in his misery, she had acted. He found himself seeking her out. He told himself it was about the estate. "The ledgers?" he said, finding her in the newly revived conservatory, where green shoots were beginning to curl around the trellises. Ilara looked up, wary. The fire was gone from her eyes, replaced by a guarded neutrality. "Your Grace?" "The ledgers. You were right." He forced the words out. "The numbers Mr. Davies provides are incomplete. I've cross-referenced them with the bank drafts. There are discrepancies. Large ones." Ilara set down her watering can. "I thought as much. He's been falsifying the income from the tenant farms, hasn't he? Claiming they are destitute, while... What? While submitting invoices for repairs that were never done, for seed that was never bought. He's been stealing Ilara. For years. He had used her name. Neither of them acknowledged it. He's been lining his pockets while the tenants starve," Ilara said, her voice turning to ice. "The man must be dismissed, handed over to the magistrates." "Yes." Alistair hesitated. "But there's more. The amounts are too large for a man like Davies. He's not spending it. I had my solicitor make inquiries. Davies has no carriage. His wife wears bombazine. He is not living like a thief." "He's a puppet," Ilara said, her eyes narrowing. "He is stealing for someone else." Alistair nodded, impressed. "My thought exactly. He's diverting the funds. But to whom?" "The man at the ball," Ilara said immediately. Alistair stared. "Shaw? Lord Peregrine Shaw," she confirmed. "The man who knew your father's finances. The man who looked at me, not as a woman, but as a prize he had lost." A cold dread settled on Alistair. It made perfect, sickening sense. His father, in his desperation, must have fallen into Shaw's orbit. Shaw, sensing the impending ruin, likely placed Davies as the estate steward to bleed Ashworth dry from the inside. His plan? To wait until the estate was bankrupt, the lands forfeit, and then buy it all. The house, the title, the history, for pennies on the pound. "Ilara," Alistair breathed, the name easier this time. "If that's true..." "He is not just a creditor, Alistair. He is a predator," she said. "And my dowry. It didn't just pay your debts. It ruined his plan. He was this close to owning Ashworth." "Which makes him exceptionally dangerous," Alistair finished. "He is furious. His attack at the ball was a warning." A reluctant, powerful alliance formed. The household slept, but a single light burned in the Duke's study. For the first time, Alistair did not feel alone in his fight. They sat across from each other at the great mahogany desk, the ledgers spread between them. "Look here," Ilara murmured, her finger tracing a line. "This payment to Smithson's for roofing lead. It's dated March 1st. But I have the vicar's letter from March 3rd, complaining that the church roof, which we are responsible for, is still leaking so badly it ruined the altar cloth." "The lead was never purchased," Alistair said, his admiration growing. "Davies just took the money, and here, a bank draft to a PS Imports, £4,000. "Peregrine Shaw," Alistair growled. "He's not even hiding it. He's arrogant. He believes you are your father's son, too proud and too foolish to look at the books." "I was," Alistair admitted, the confession costing him. "Until you?" Ilara looked up, her violet eyes meeting his. The air in the room thickened. It was past 2 in the morning. A log crackled in the hearth. He could see the exhaustion under her eyes, the smudge of ink on her knuckle. He had an overwhelming urge to reach across the desk and wipe it away. "We need proof, Alistair," she said, her voice soft. "Proof that connects Davies directly to Shaw. A letter. A witness. Davies is too frightened. We need to trap him." They worked until dawn, formulating a plan. Alistair would confront Davies, not with an accusation, but with a new, tempting lie. He would tell the steward that he intended to sell the northern farms, the very ones Davies was using for his scheme. It would force Davies to report to his master. The next day, Alistair followed the plan. He watched Davies's face, pale, then flush. The steward made his excuses and left the house an hour later. Alistair, who had a groom following the steward, received the report that evening. He went straight to Lord Shaw's town house. "Your Grace." Stayed for nearly an hour. "We have him," Alistair said, a grim satisfaction filling him. He found Ilara in the dining room, instructing Mrs. Croft on the new menus. He dismissed the housekeeper. "You were right," he said. "He ran straight to Shaw." Ilara nodded, relief evident on her face. "Then we have him." "We do." He found he didn't want to leave. "Honoria tells me you've helped her." Ilara looked surprised. "I merely encouraged her sketching and introduced her to Lord Ellesmere's son. He's a quiet man, but he admires botanical drawings. They seemed compatible." Alistair knew what she had done. She had discreetly and brilliantly orchestrated a match for his shy, overlooked sister, finding one of the few men in London who would appreciate Honoria's quiet intelligence over a loud dowry. "That was kind of you," he said stiffly. "Honoria is a wonderful young woman," Ilara said simply. "She deserves to be happy." "And what about you?" he wanted to ask. "Do you deserve to be happy?" "The kitchen is cold," Ilara said, rubbing her arms. "Yes, it is." He stood there, knowing he should leave, knowing he should go to the club and begin the subtle process of ruining Peregrine Shaw. But he didn't move. "Ilara," he said. "Yes, Alistair." He had no words. His vow of hatred, his declaration of indifference, stood between them like a castle wall. He could not tear it down. So, instead, he did the only thing he could. He shrugged off his heavy greatcoat, the one he'd worn while waiting for the groom's report, and draped it over her shoulders. It was a functional, practical gesture. It was also the most intimate thing he had ever done. The coat was huge on her, smelling of wool, horse, and his own scent. She clutched it at the neck, her small hands lost in the heavy fabric. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and searching. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's warm." "You should not be in the kitchens," he said, his voice gruff to cover the sudden thickness in his throat. "You are the Duchess." "I am. I am still learning what that means," she said. He looked at her, truly looked at her, wrapped in his coat. Her intelligence was a beacon. Her quiet strength humbled him. Her compassion for his tenants, for his sister, for the very house that was her prison, was a thing he could not comprehend. He realized with a shock that stole his breath that he did not hate her. He did not even resent her. He was, against all logic and in defiance of his own broken heart, beginning to admire his wife. And that, more than any threat from Shaw, terrified him. With the proof of the conspiracy solidifying, the atmosphere at Ashworth House should have improved. Instead, it grew heavier. Alistair and Ilara were now partners in a dangerous secret, bound by late-night conferences and shared knowledge. This new intimacy was a minefield. A brushed hand as they passed a ledger, a shared look across the dinner table when Honoria mentioned Lord Shaw's name. Each instance was fraught with unspoken meaning. Alistair found himself obsessed. He watched her arrange flowers. He listened to her play the pianoforte, not with the vapid brilliance of a society miss, but with a deep, complex melancholy. He realized he was falling, and falling hard. He was falling for the woman he had sworn to a loveless, transactional existence. The guilt was a physical weight. Lord Peregrine Shaw, sensing his precarious position, did not wait to be exposed. He retaliated. He could no longer attack Alistair's finances. Ilara's dowry had inoculated him. So, Shaw aimed for the one place he knew Alistair was undefended, his past. The invitation was to the Duke of Rutland's masquerade, the event of the season. Alistair and Ilara had to attend. To refuse would be to admit weakness. Ilara was dressed as Diana, the huntress, in dark green velvet, a silver crescent in her hair. She was, Alistair realized with a jolt, beautiful. He was dressed as a Venetian nobleman, all black silk and shadow, a stark white mask covering his features. The ballroom was a sea of jewels and masks. The whispers followed them. The Winter Duke and his Duchess. They say she's a miracle worker. They say he's still obsessed. Obsessed with what? Ilara asked, her voice low as they took their place for the quadrille. Gossip, Alistair said, his hand tightening on hers as the dance required. Pay it no mind. At midnight, the unmasking was announced. As the orchestra swelled, the guests removed their masks, and Alistair's world tilted. Standing across the ballroom, on the arm of Lord Peregrine Shaw, was Margot Beaufort. Alistair's blood ran cold. He couldn't breathe. It was her. The same blonde hair, the same cornflower blue eyes, the same radiant smile. But no, she was gone. She had died. Consumption, his father had told him. A wasting sickness after. Alistair! Ilara's voice was sharp. She had felt the tremor that ran through him. Who? He whispered, unable to look away. Shaw, spotting Alistair's frozen stare, smirked. He led the woman directly to them. Your Grace, Shaw said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. And Duchess, may I present a dear friend of mine, just returned from the continent? Miss Anne Beaufort. Beaufort, Ilara said, her eyes darting from the woman to her husband. Alistair, darling, the woman said, her voice a shade deeper than he remembered. It has been an age. It wasn't Margot. Up close, the differences were clear. This woman, Anne, was her cousin. But the resemblance was uncanny and clearly cultivated. Miss Beaufort, Alistair managed, his voice a strangled rasp. Oh, Anne, please, she smiled. We were practically brother and sister once, weren't we? Before poor dear Margot. She let the sentence hang, her eyes wide with faux sadness. Shaw put a protective arm around her. Yes, a terrible tragedy. Miss Beaufort has been telling me all about it. How Alistair's intensity, his obsession with Margot, became so suffocating. The nearby guests fell silent, listening intently. She says Margot felt trapped, Shaw continued, his voice a blade of pure malice. That Alistair's refusal to let her breathe drove her to despair. That his heavy, dark moods. That is enough, Shaw, Alistair said, his voice shaking. Is it? Shaw's smile was predatory. Poor Margot. Such a delicate flower, crushed by a love that was more like possession. It's no wonder her constitution failed her. Some say she simply gave up, wasted away just to escape him. It was a public execution. Shaw was painting Alistair not as a grieving lover, but as a monster, a brooding, obsessive tyrant who had driven a young woman to her grave. And the worst part? Some of it felt true. Alistair, Ilara said, her hand finding his arm. Her grip was iron. Alistair looked at her. Her face was pale, but her eyes were not on him. They were on Shaw, and they were filled with a cold, analytical fury. Lord Shaw, Ilara said, her voice cutting through the silence. You mistake my husband. The Duke feels loss, as any man would. But he is not a man who crushes things. He is a man who restores them. She gestured to the room. as he is restoring his family name, a name you seem intent on tarnishing." She turned to Anne Beaufort. "And you, madam? To trade on your cousin's memory for a moment's notice in a ballroom. It is beneath the name you carry. You will excuse us." She did not wait for him. She simply took his hand and pulled him from the floor, leading him through the stunned crowd and out onto the terrace. The moment the doors closed, Alistair ripped his mask off and slumped against the balustrade, gasping for air. The old wound, the one he thought had scabbed over, was ripped raw. "Are you all right?" Elara asked, her voice hesitant. "He's right," Alistair whispered, his head in his hands. "He's right. It was my fault. Shaw is a liar. He twists—" "No." Alistair slammed his fist on the stone. "It was my fault, but not how he thinks, not how anyone thinks." Elara waited, silent. "I wasn't in love with Margot," he said, the confession tearing from his throat. "Not like that. I think I tried to be, after, to make it a grand tragedy. But it was a lie." He looked up at his wife, his shadow in the moonlight. "Margot Beaufort was my best friend, the sister I never had, before Honoria. She was all light and laughter, and she was desperately, hopelessly in love with someone else." "Someone else?" Elara whispered. "A painter, an artist, a commoner, a man named Arthur Price. He was brilliant, passionate, and penniless. Her family would never have allowed it. My father would have hit the roof." He pushed off the wall, pacing. "So I helped them. I acted as their go-between. I carried their letters. I was arranging for them to elope. I was covering for her. I was supposed to get her to the carriage." He stopped, the memory overwhelming him. "But my father found out. He found her letters. He thought I was the one writing them. He thought I was trying to run off with her and disgrace the family before he could marry me off to some heiress. He locked her in her rooms at their country estate. He forbade me from seeing her. I tried. I rode there, but her father's guards turned me away. I sent letters. They were returned. 3 months later, she was dead. Consumption, they said. But Shaw was right. She gave up. She wasted away from a broken heart." Alistair turned to the empty gardens, his shoulders shaking. "I failed her, Elara. My best friend. She trusted me, and I failed. Her great love, Arthur Price. He vanished. I tried to find him, to tell him, but he was gone. And I let the world believe I was the one mourning a lost love. It was easier. It was better than the truth. The truth. That his coldness, his grief, was just a thick, choking blanket of guilt. He had failed Margot. He had failed his father. He had failed his estate. He stood exposed, waiting for Elara's judgment, for her pity, for her disgust. He heard her move. She did not touch him. She simply stood beside him, her shoulder almost brushing his, and looked out at the dark garden. "So you built a fortress of winter," she said, her voice impossibly gentle, "to keep everyone out, because you believed you deserved to be punished." He couldn't speak. He just nodded, his throat raw. "You didn't fail her, Alistair," she said, turning to face him. He was shocked to see that her own eyes were bright with tears. But these were not the tears of despair he had seen before. These were tears of empathy. "You were a boy, trying to help your friend against a world that runs on titles and gold. You fought for her. The fault lies with your father, with her family, with a society that makes love impossible." He looked at her, truly seeing the strength that had been there all along, the strength he had mistaken for coldness, the same strength he had shattered with his cruel words. "Elara," he choked out. She reached up, not to his face, but to his chest, placing her palm flat over his heart. "It is not your fault." He covered her hand with his, pressing it tight. He wasn't the Winter Duke. He was just Alistair, a man drowning in regret. And she was the first person in a decade to offer him a lifeline. He leaned his forehead against hers, closing his eyes. "He doesn't know the truth," he whispered. "Sure. He thinks I was the obsessive lover. He doesn't know about Arthur Price. Then we have an advantage," Elara whispered back, her voice fierce, her hand still warm against his heart. "He just showed us his strategy. He will use your past to destroy your present. He doesn't realize I am your present." In that moment, under the mask of a Venetian noble, Alistair Vance's frozen heart did not just break, it melted. And he knew, with terrifying certainty, that his vow had been the greatest lie of his life. The revelation on the terrace bound them. The last remnants of their separate prisons evaporated. They were, in all things, a partnership. But the danger remained. "Shaw's attack was clumsy," Elara said 2 days later, pacing the study. "He used Anne Beaufort to spread a lie, but he doesn't know the real story." "He just knows I am vulnerable when it comes to Margot," Alistair said, examining the stolen ledgers. "He is furious his plan to acquire Ashworth was thwarted. He will push Davies harder." "He's blackmailing Mr. Davies," Elara said, stopping. "But what leverage does he have? Davies isn't just stealing for money. He's stealing out of fear. Shaw is a man who collects secrets, Alistair. He trades in weakness." She fell silent, a new, cold dread dawning on her face. "My father, Alistair. Viscount Harrington. What about him? Why do you think he was so desperate to marry me to a duke? It was not just social ambition." She took a steadying breath. "My father. He has secrets, too. He built his entire fortune from nothing. He is also a man running from his past. He was not always Harrington. He was born to a poor family in York." Alistair could barely form the question. What was his name?" Elara looked him dead in the eyes, her own filled with a terrible dawning comprehension. "His name," she whispered, "was Arthur Price." Alistair gripped the desk. "No, it cannot be." "The painter?" Elara's hand flew to her mouth. "The man Margot Beaufort loved. My father?" It was impossible. It was perfect. Shaw's entire web laid bare. "Shaw knew," Alistair breathed, the pieces falling into place with sickening speed. "He must have known. He was my father's confidant. He knew about Margot. He knew about the penniless artist. And somehow, he discovered that the great industrialist, Viscount Harrington, was that artist. And he blackmailed him," Elara finished, her voice hollow. "He was blackmailing my father, and he was using Davies to bleed you dry. He intended to destroy both men connected to Margot Beaufort, your father, for imprisoning her, and my father, for abandoning her." "And you?" Alistair asked, his voice raw. "You were the prize, the final twist of the knife, the marriage. It was Shaw's design." "No," Elara said, and Alistair's head snapped up. "The marriage was my idea." "What?" "My father was distraught. Shaw was threatening him. My father, he loved my mother, Alistair. He was terrified of his new life crumbling. Shaw offered him a deal, marry his daughter to the new Duke of Ashworth. The dowry would satisfy Shaw, and he would walk away. He lied, of course." "But I agreed to the marriage," Elara said, her voice firm. "I knew nothing of Margot, only that Shaw had some hold over both our families. I thought if I was inside Ashworth, I could find out what leverage he had. I thought I could protect my father. And you." Alistair looked at her, his heart aching. She had walked into this prison willingly. Not as a social climber, but as a sacrifice. She had married a man who despised her, to save her father from a shadow, and to save Alistair from a man she didn't even know. His declaration, "I will never love you," was not just cruel. It was the laugh of a fool in the face of a saint. "Ilara," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He crossed the room and, for the first time, took her hands. Not in anger, not in practicality, but in awe. You did this. For us. You are my family now," she whispered, her hands clinging to his. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "Then let us end this. Together." The final confrontation was at White's, the gentlemen's club where Shaw held his high-stakes card parties. Alistair arrived, with Ilara's father, Viscount Harrington, in tow. The Viscount was pale, but resolute. They found Shaw at the hazard table. "Ashworth," Shaw boomed. "And Harrington, what a pleasure." "We have come," Alistair said, his voice carrying across the quiet, smoke-filled room. "To call in your markers, Shaw." Shaw laughed. "I believe you are the one who has been paying me." "You blackmailed my father-in-law, Arthur Price," Alistair said. The room went dead silent. Shaw's smile froze. Harrington stepped forward. "You used the memory of a woman I loved and failed to extort me," he said, his voice firm. "And you used this man's estate as your personal bank." "These are wild accusations," Shaw hissed. "Are they?" Alistair threw a thick ledger onto the green felt of the table. "This is from my steward, Mr. Davies, who, by the way, has made a full confession to the magistrates. It seems he was afraid of you, Shaw, but he was more afraid of prison." Shaw's face turned ashen. "Every fraudulent invoice," Alistair continued, "every stolen pound, every bank draft to PS Imports. It's all here. You've been systematically robbing my estate for a decade." Shaw looked around. The men in the room were looking at him with cold disgust. He was not just a rogue, he was a thief. A blackmailer. "It's a copy, Peregrine," Alistair said. "The original is with my solicitor, and the Bow Street runners." Shaw, seeing every escape route close, did the only thing he could. He bolted. He shoved a baron out of his way and fled to the club. Alistair let him go. He was finished in England. Alistair turned to Harrington. "Go home to your daughter, Lord Harrington," he said, his voice quiet. "She's waiting for you." Alistair Vance walked out of White's, not as the Winter Duke, but as a man who had finally laid his ghosts to rest. He walked into the cool London night, free, and all he wanted was to go home, to his wife. He returned at dawn. Ilara was waiting in the very sitting room where he had delivered his cruel vow. "It is done," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Shaw has fled. Your father is safe." The tension left her in a rush, and Alistair crossed the room, pulling her into a fierce embrace. They held each other, the silence full of relief. "I was a fool," he whispered, cupping her face. "My vow. It was the lie of a broken man. I said it to hurt you, because I was hurting." He confessed that a single tear had shattered his defenses. To prove the past was truly gone, he produced Margot's locket. He opened it, revealing a hidden note. "It's not for me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's for your father. It's her forgiveness." He pressed it into Ilara's hand, a tangible peace offering for her family. "And your heart, your grace," Ilara whispered, tears in her eyes. Alistair smiled, the winter finally gone from his face. "It is no longer silent. and it is, and always will be, entirely yours, Elara." He kissed her then. It was not a kiss of duty, but a kiss of profound relief, a kiss that sealed their new beginning. As the sun streamed in, the Duke and his Duchess finally spoke the words of truth. "I love you, Alistair. And I love you, my wife." The vow, "I will never love you," was broken by the silent power of a single tear. Alistair and Elara proved that even a marriage born of debt and deceit can be restored by courage and truth. They tore down the ghosts of their past to build a future, proving that the coldest hearts can be thawed by a love that is fierce, intelligent, and real. Their story is one of a silence broken, a winter ended, and a contract rewritten by the heart. If you are moved by the story of the Winter Duke and his silent Duchess, please don't keep it a secret. Like this video to show your support. Share it with a friend who appreciates a story of drama and redemption, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel. We have so many more stories of hidden hearts and secret vows waiting to be told. Click that subscribe button and don't miss a single one.